Let's continue forward, moving on with the limbic system. This is where your primitive emotions come from. Things like fear, things like pleasure, as well as higher functions like your ability to reason. Is this really something to be fearful of? Or is it simply a cat in the bushes? The limbic system causes these very strong emotional reactions, but being that we're humans, we can override that to direct our behavior. Like I mentioned earlier, if you're walking along in the dark and you hear a noise in the bushes, your initial thought or your initial feeling might be one of fear. You feel your heart rate go up, your eyes widen. You start thinking about what could be in the bushes. But then you recognize that it's just a cat. And you rationalize that there really isn't any danger and there's no reason to be scared. And so we redirect our behavior to something that is less fearful. Now there's a few pieces involved in the limbic system. The amygdala, which will be involved in the emotional overtones, and the hippocampus, which is important for us to retain information that we learn and to retain memories. And so we see it here. We see the hippocampus is kind of wrapping around. If you notice, we're linked with the olfactory bulb, which is going to help us with our sense of smell. And this is one of the reasons why your sense of smell is so closely tied with memory. You think about when you smell something familiar and all these memories come back. You smell spaghetti and you remember how your grandma used to make it every Sunday. That would be why you have such a strong memory or strong emotional response to a certain smell. This is tied with this. So here's the hippocampus, and then this little blackberry looking structure on the end is the amygdala, which will be involved with those emotional overtones. So let's look at learning and memory since we're talking about the hippocampus. Learning is what happens when we recall something from the past and we use memories that we already have. Right? So we've learned that a cat in the bushes is not dangerous, and we modify our behaviors because of that. Memory is just the ability to hold onto a thought or recall past events. Short-term memory is just within the last few minutes. Long-term memory is more than a few minutes. And this is where sometimes people think of long-term memory as it has to be months or years. Long-term memory is just more than an hour. Did you remember what we said in the past video that you watched an hour ago? Short-term memory would be like, did you remember how I described the amygdala a minute ago? Think about it. Think about some things that you use your short memory for, and think about some things you use your long-term memory for. If we look into long-term memory, there's two different forms of memories we can have: episodic and semantic. Episodic, the way I like to think of it, is if you remember an episode from TV. You remember the people who are there, you remember the events that happened in general, but not necessarily perfect details, not necessarily a perfect event. So you remember that you went to, let's say, a concert, but you don't remember the exact time you arrived. You don't remember exactly how many minutes you spent. You don't remember exactly what time you went and used the restroom, but you remember who you went with. You remember the songs, you remember the band. That would be episodic. Semantic memory deals with numbers and words. Your ability to memorize a poem would be semantic memory. Or your ability to understand what certain numbers mean. A phone number would be semantic memory. For example, with semantic memory, if I say 8675309, some of you might remember the song Jenny by Tommy Two-Tone. Right? That would be semantic memory. You memorize the number and the association that goes with it. Skill memory is what we would think of when we say muscle memory. Your ability to remember how to ride a bike, how to hit a baseball, how to write, right? How to hold a pencil would be skill memory. And then language is specific, but language depends on semantic memory. If you don't remember the words, then it's really hard to describe a language and to speak. and to write. So let's get into some higher level thinking with the brain and looking at how we handle language, reading, speaking, and so forth. So let's say you're reading the words on the slide right now. What's going on in your brain? First and foremost, you have to bring in the visual information. That's going to be handled by your visual cortex back in your occipital lobe. We have to see the word. But beyond just seeing it, we have to make sense of it. That's where the Wernicke's area comes in, where we understand the meaning of the word. We interpret the language. Then we pass that information to the Broca's area, which is going to handle how do you actually form a response? How do you speak? What movements do you need your mouth to make? And then the primary motor cortex will handle the actual motor control of your mouth, of your throat, right, of your tongue, so that you can speak. Let's look at how speech is affected by damage to certain areas, like the Wernicke's area and the Broca's area.
Hi, Byron. How are you?
I'm happy. Are you pretty? You look good.
What are you doing today?
We stayed with the water over here at the moment and talked with the people for them over there. They're diving for them at the moment. They'll save in the moment. He'll have water very soon for him. With luck for him.
And Mike, when was your stroke?
I was 7 years ago.
Okay. And what did you used to do?
Worked Autodesk, sales, and worldwide, and very good. Yeah.
Okay. And who are you looking at over there when you turn your head?
That's my wife.
Okay. And why is she helping you to talk?
She's a speech.
So you have trouble with your speech?
Yeah.
And what's that called?
Aphasia.
All right.
So we saw two videos, one where someone had damage to the Wernicke's area, that was video 1, and another who had damage to the Broca's area, which was video 2. We see the difference in how their speech was affected. In the Wernicke's area, the person who had that stroke, who had damage in that area, didn't quite seem to understand what was being asked of them. They didn't quite pull in that information correctly. So while they were able to speak very well and pronounce words very accurately, it didn't really make much sense. With the person who had damage to their Broca's area, they understood every question that was being asked of them. No problem with their ability to understand language and read, but when it came to finding the right word, when it came to their ability to portray what they wanted to communicate, that became difficult. It was difficult for that person to remember the correct word, even though they knew what they wanted to say.